and welcome to The Download, bringing you discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective. I'm your host, Christine Niles, joined today by my co-hosts, Kyle Copey and Brad Eli. The president of Notre Dame is stepping down. University officials announced on Friday the 13th, Father John Jenkins will be stepping down from his role as president at the end of this school year. Father Jenkins, a priest in the Congregation of Holy Cross, has headed the university since 2005. He's the university's 17th president. Administrators are looking for the next president. And according to Notre Dame's bylaws, the president must be a priest of the Congregation of Holy Cross and will be elected by the Board of Trustees. The news has many Catholics thinking about the major ups and downs that have happened at Notre Dame in recent decades. Now, of course, I graduated from Notre Dame Law School in 2003. This was just a couple years before Father Jenkins came on as president. At the time that I was there, Father Malloy was president. And I was a Protestant at the time. I hadn't yet come back to the Catholic faith when I first came to Notre Dame, but I remember I was a conservative, pro-life Protestant. And I remember being so impressed that Father Malloy had refused to grant official status to Queer ND, which was the LGBT group. He wouldn't give them official status on campus. And I remember writing to him personally and saying, thank you for upholding, Christian teachings. Thank you for being faithful, even though I wasn't a Catholic, but still I was impressed as a Protestant. And I got a personal letter back from him. All of that changed under Father Jenkins. When he came on board, everything changed. And we'll get into all of that and all the different changes that Father Jenkins implemented. But of course now, Queer ND does have official student status, as well as other LGBT groups like the Rainbow Alliance. And now it's just going nuts. Now you've got courses. You can actually take a course on drag shows at Notre Dame. Can you even imagine going to college, them offering a course on drag shows? I mean, how is that even a college course? Yes, especially a Catholic school. In fact, they're hosting a drag show on November 3rd. It's coming up in just a few weeks. They're hosting a drag show on the campus of University of Notre Dame. And it's just unbelievable to me. But Notre Dame, we've called out Notre Dame many, many times. As much as I love the campus, and there are very many special things about it, I actually came back to the faith at Notre Dame, so good things are still happening there. There are pockets of faith there. You just have to find those pockets of faith. But unfortunately, over the years, it's just really gone downhill. And
what was the draw for you for Notre Dame? What was?
Well, to be honest, at the time, I was awarded the highest scholarship there. I just didn't have money, so I was like, I'm just going to go wherever they give me the scholarships.
And you wanted a law? You went for law school,
right? Mm-hmm.
Did you have any interaction with Hesburgh, Father Theodore Hesburgh? Did there any recollections of him coming around, talking with people or anything?
No, at that time he was extremely old. He was very, very elderly at the time, so I never actually saw him in person. But I do remember the way people would speak about him. He was like a canonized saint. He was just a legend and a saint, and it was just so hallowed, and you only spoke about him in the most glowing terms. And I didn't realize until later, learning about his history, how he contributed to the destruction of the faith.
With Jenkins here, Father Jenkins, in his inaugural address in 2005, he actually said he wanted Notre Dame to be a preeminent research university. And that's very important to understand. He wants it to be a research university. Dude, this is a Catholic university. I want it to be a preeminent Catholic university where you will have, you'll be formed as a Catholic individual, intellectual, infusing all of your other studies and your understanding, but ultimately making you a saint, in God's kingdom and at the end of your life. So that idea that he wants to be a preeminent research university really goes back to Hesburgh and what they did with the Land O'Lakes, which is not, this show is not about that, but we've talked about that before. And just so the audience knows that the culture there that Jenkins inherited, or the what he's expected to uphold, was this idea that they wanted an independently thinking university, a Catholic university that wasn't beholden in any way, shape, or form to Catholic doctrine in any way, shape, or form. And that's what Hesburgh did in the late 60s. And actually, I believe McCarrick actually had a role in that as well, Theodore McCarrick, the disgraced ex-cardinal. So the idea that he's coming in with his feet on the ground that says this is not about Catholic, this is about free thinking. and we see where all that free thinking goes right off the rails.
Well, the linchpin with the Land O'Lakes conference was that little phrase, academic freedom. That's what Hesburgh and his cohorts put into that statement, and that was sort of the rallying call for all, the once great Catholic universities to cry out and say, no, we're going to become dissident in our view of church teaching now. And that was led by Hesburgh and the Notre Dame crew there, and which was a really unfortunate thing to see. I mean, Hesburgh oversaw, the destruction of Notre Dame. It was all laid at his feet. So Jenkins, as you said, is just kind of inheriting this. Hesburgh back in the 60s wanted, he was sort of envious of what was going on at Stanford and Harvard, and he saw all those once Protestant, colleges, universities gain such prominent status. He wanted that for Notre Dame, it seemed like, and the way that he sought to do that was to remove their Catholicity, and that's exactly what he set out to do. He brought in dissident theologians to spew bad theology. He brought in Planned Parenthood. He brought in other politicians who were that old phrase, personally pro-life, but personally opposed. Yeah, but this is all under Hesburgh. So this is what Jenkins is inheriting.
And the thing that I don't really get about that is, I understand you want to pursue truth, you want the freedom to pursue truth. Like, say, in the 1500s, if someone's saying the world is flat, you're like, well, I really want to explore the full, truth here about that, or the sun revolves around the earth around the sun, or whatever. Really, it was all about egocentric problems back then. But the idea is that if you're Catholic, you already understand that in the Ten Commandments there's a moral truth. In drag shows there's a moral truth. In queer whatever, in contraception, and all these things. You have so much of that truth out there. Do you really need to just dredge all of that stuff up and reprove it? Or are you just trying to be dissident against that? And how does that make you a better law student? How does that make you a better scientist or whatever? There's all sorts of good Catholic scientists out there that uphold Catholic truth. So I don't really understand the whole intellectual freedom. It sounds very good, but truth doesn't contradict truth. So,
and something else people don't realize too, in addition to the Land O'Lakes statement, people don't realize that Father Hesburgh was actually trying to get changes to the church's teaching on contraception. So just go read from a paragraph here from the National Catholic Register, an article written by Tom Nash. Father Hesburgh quietly organized pro-contraception population conferences at Notre Dame beginning in the early 1960s, and also arranged a meeting in 1965 between John D. Rockefeller III, who was a huge population control advocate, and Pope Paul VI, in the hope of modifying the church's teaching in the encyclical that would become known as Humanae Vitae 3 years later. So this was a man who was trying to foment revolution in the church. Obviously, lots of high connections. Pope Paul, this is the Pope himself, with John D. Rockefeller, the wealthiest man in the country, arranging a meeting so he could influence the church's teaching on this. Fortunately, thanks be to God, that didn't work. But these were ways in which Hesburgh was undermining the faith. So that's why I'm so surprised looking back that the way he was spoken about on campus, even among faithful Catholic professors, it's just like he's this legendary figure, and they just sort of gloss over all this other stuff that he did.
So you have this lieutenant now. His lieutenant is Father Jenkins, and it's in 2005. I was really a watershed moment for Michael Voris here at Church Militant was in 2009 when Obama himself came to speak at Notre Dame, and Voris was there covering the event as a reporter. And when he saw the Air Force One coming down, he just had this sense of, dread, like, oh, this is not right. And Obama speaking there at Notre Dame and also receiving an honorary degree at Notre Dame. And my goodness, if there's anybody that's more in the tank for gay advocacy and anti-Catholicism and, Christians, you keep your Bibles and your guns, but, whatever. The idea that, and an abortion, my goodness. So the idea that he would be given an award, and there's always this big picture where Jenkins has given him a hug and all this type of stuff. So really supporting that whole role. Fast forward some years, Vice President Joe Biden, who actually officiated a gay ceremony in Washington and very much in the tank for abortion. He received an honorary Laetare medal in 2016. There was also John Boehner, Speaker of the House, who left now Washington to become a cannabis lobbyist for dope smoking. Wow. Quite a legacy there. It pays well. But anyway, not so much Boehner at the time, but it was Biden, and he received a Laetare medal in 2016. We really covered that here for Church Militant. Like, this is really odd. Why would you honor someone with this highest honor that you have at Notre Dame and give it to some character like this. And when we come to 2017, you know, Trump not invited whatsoever. You know, they sent Pence there. And people kind of see how that, you know, has played out over the years with Pence. So the idea that Trump himself, who arguably would be the most pro-life president in the history of his recent statements now don't really hold up as well, but the idea that he was very much more pro-life than anybody had been up until that time, because one, it was just a great issue after the 70s. So, and he wouldn't be invited to speak there when he was very much for religious freedom, very much for pro-life and everything. Most of the Catholic tenets, there was a problem with, you know, being in the tank for same-sex marriage and that type of thing. He had a blind spot there, but most of the doctrine, he was very much, far more than from Biden and Obama, and he wasn't invited there at all. So, yeah.
And what's disturbing too about Notre Dame is, for instance, during the pandemic, so many Christian institutions, Christian organizations, churches, some schools were fighting against this vaccine mandate because they were, you know, conscientiously objecting to these things, fighting against it. Notre Dame went against the Vatican, and they actually issued a vaccine mandate for all students. So they went above and beyond what their church, you know, the Vatican said you had to do. They didn't even fight against this. And then you have another thing too, the scandalous contraception insurance policy that they have on campus. So Notre Dame actually, they filed a lawsuit along with a number of other religious institutions against the Obama mandate that required, you know, contraception to be covered in health insurance. So a bunch of Catholic organizations sued. They lost, and so they included this coverage of contraception in their insurance. Trump comes along, he drops the mandate, says you don't have to do that anymore, you can take that off. And this is what Notre Dame decides to do. They actually decide to keep the coverage, and this is what they say at the time. Notre Dame, as a Catholic institution, follows Catholic teaching about the use of contraceptives and engaged in the recent lawsuit to protect its freedom to act in accord with its principles. Recognizing, however, the plurality of religious and other convictions among its employees, it will not interfere with the provision of contraceptives that will be administered and funded independently of the university. So we will just violate Catholic teaching because we care more about the religious plurality of our employees. It just makes no sense. At
a Catholic university, and you know, speaking of the insurance, the healthcare issue, I mean, to my knowledge, I know we've reported on this in the past, but I think Notre Dame was also offering benefits recognizing same-sex couples. I mean, again, at a Catholic university, why are these people even employed there to begin with?
And it's not required. The law didn't require it. They went above and beyond what the law requires.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Bishop Kevin Rhodes came out on that contraception, caving into the pressure groups on that, and Kevin Rhodes from Fort Wayne in 2018, he slammed Notre Dame for that. He said, this is not right that they would go on and do that. And the other one was the maybe even more shocking in one sense is the abortion doula. The Notre Dame came out with a series on reproductive justice after the Dobbs ruling overturned Roe, and Sycamore Trust President William Dempsey had this to say about that. He said there has been in this pushback, it was a series that was pushing back for this reproductive justice and saying this was a bad thing that Roe got overturned. And he says, Dempsey says there have been no panelists who have explained the Catholic Church's position on abortion and responded to what's been said by the opponents of church teaching. So it really wasn't even a balanced panel. I mean, you could even at least say, well, we're just having this open debate with both sides being presented, but it wasn't even that. So to have that type of thing going on, with the queer advocacy going on, the contraception going on, you know, and this is exactly why you would want, you know, a grandparent saying, oh, I would like my grandchildren to go to Notre Dame because I went there, and it's a solid Catholic institution. And it's like, Grandpa and Grandma, it's not that way anymore. You're going to go there, and you could lose your faith if you're not careful. So you don't go to a place like that just because they teach you reading, writing, arithmetic. You go there for the overall formation, and you want Catholic formation in that. You want the whatever Christ had to give to the world to be part of that formation and your worldview and your values and all of that. And that's been completely washed out at Notre Dame and many other Catholic institutions as well, precisely because of that Land O'Lakes conference. And that was actually pushed back against finally by John Paul II in the mid-90s. I think it was Ex Corde. Ecclesiae. Yep. And he said, you know, Catholic institutions, you need to hire Catholic personnel, you need to have a Catholic message, you need to have Catholic formation as part of your repertoire. And supernatural truth does not contradict natural truth.
Yeah.
If somehow it does, then you're misunderstanding somehow your supernatural truth, and it's not really supernatural truth. Or you're misunderstanding your natural truth somehow, and it's not really natural truth. But if you are understanding both correctly, there's no contradiction in those whatsoever. You have complete academic freedom to pursue the truth in both areas without any contradiction whatsoever.
And I think it's great that St. John Paul II issued that. I believe it was an apostolic constitution, but many argue that was kind of too little too late. The damage had already been done, which is unfortunate. And if you go back, Christine mentioned Father Edward Malloy when you were there. There was even some problems under his tenure, from what I understand. In the late 1980s, there were a few female professors at Notre Dame who approached Malloy and asked him to start this gender studies program. If you know anything about communism and Marxism and the infiltration into the academic institutions, that is always a code word for them to get that stuff in there. And Malloy, 16th president of Notre Dame, allowed that to come in. So that was one of these peaks in terms of Notre Dame's destruction. Actually, that kind of led there. And so obviously, Jenkins took over for Malloy in 2005. And you mentioned William Dempsey, who's been a great source for us here at Church Militant, commenting on the destruction of Notre Dame. He said that 2005 was kind of this turning point as well, was one of those peaks in terms of Notre Dame's destruction, because when Jenkins took over, very, very shortly after that, you had, for the first time in the university's history, established groups, gay clubs being allowed on campus, and this happens under Jenkins' tenure. And even just a couple of years ago, the school was right out there in your face in terms of its website being out and proud for Gay Pride Month, which is supposed to be the month of the Sacred Heart, right, in June.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, but 2 years ago we reported on this. They started putting on their website, whatever it was, celebrating Gay Pride Month, and again under Jenkins' tenure.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have a National Coming Out Day, too, on campus. But speaking of and gender studies, I can't think of a more useless degree than gender studies. What do you do with gender studies, seriously? I mean, what do you go on to do unless you just become a professor of gender studies? It's just completely...
You might go on to become a Supreme Court justice. You know what a woman is when you're asked spontaneously? So maybe that's a valuable thing.
So you can't answer.
See, she should have went to Notre Dame, gender studies.
But on the issue of abortion and pro-life and all of this, Notre Dame has been completely hypocritical. So here they are allowing an abortion doula to speak on campus and other things like that, and yet last year they yanked support for a pro-life event because they were offended by a Ben Shapiro tweet from 2010, from more than a decade ago, because Ben Shapiro apparently tweeted something against the Palestinians and in support of Israel, and they were offended by that. They said, well, this isn't in keeping with the pro-life event, so we're going to yank our donations from this pro-life event. But abortion doula on campus, perfectly fine, totally fine, no problem with that.
That's not going to offend anyone else.
And then something else too, if you guys recall, there was the big controversy over over Christopher Columbus, right? There's this conception flowing around that Christopher Columbus was this horrible, horrible individual.
Just a genocidal maniac.
Exactly, genocidal maniac. And there are these big, beautiful murals of Christopher Columbus in the main university administration building. I've seen them. They're very big. They're beautiful. But Notre Dame caved to the woke political correct crowd, and they covered up the murals. Caving to them because, we don't want to offend anybody. We're not going to defend this Catholic explorer. And in fact, Columbus was quite a devout Catholic, not a perfect person by any means, but certainly not the genocidal maniac that history makes him out to be. But instead of honoring his memory, they just cover it all up.
Yeah, Michael Voris, also alumni of Notre Dame, and he had a chance meeting with Jenkins one time on campus. He was there, probably to watch a football game or whatever, and he saw Jenkins, went up to him, and he wasn't in a real high-pressure situation as a reporter or anything. And it was just kind of a moment of letting your hair down. And he said, do you realize, Father, that Notre Dame is no longer teaching, it's become very liberal. It's no longer teaching the Catholic faith. And he said Jenkins was just really visibly upset. And he went up to him and grabbed his shoulders and shook him and said, this conversation is over. And Voris was kind of like, water on the floor. I mean, it was just like, whoa. And but Voris says he himself was very, very shocked by that response. So, if you're so open and liberal and welcoming and accepting, can we not exactly talk about, just have a one-on-one, man-to-man here, or father-son talk about the vector in which, or the non-Catholic vector in which Notre Dame has been traveling. So apparently you're not allowed to talk about some things like, the Catholicity or the message that's coming out of Notre Dame. So that's kind of unfortunate there, but it's also very telling that would be a private, personal reaction, such a strong reaction to just that conversation. It wasn't, in your face, I'm going to tell you what. It's just, do you realize they're not teaching? They become very liberal and they're not teaching the Catholic. And it must have struck a note. It must have struck something, because generally when there's a strong reaction like that, there's some emotion got pegged underneath. Yeah,
apparently he got really red in the face. He was just like, look at all these beautiful buildings, and it's very Catholic. We have the most beautiful, basilica, et cetera. It's like, that's not what determines Catholicity of a university. And something that Sycamore Trust has been trying to, bring awareness to is the number of faculty on campus who are not Catholic at all. I mean, it's a shockingly high number. In fact, I think it's either the minority of faculty are Catholics, or only like half. How on earth do you expect to preserve Catholic identity when at least half your staff are not even Catholic? They don't even believe. I mean, we see that right here with the contraception insurance coverage policy right there. Well, we have this religious plurality among employees, and therefore we're going to cave to them rather than maintaining our Catholic identity. But something else that was a scandal under Jenkins, again, is first-year students are subjected to a video on inclusion and sexual identity. And it's actually hosted by the Vice President of Student Affairs, Father Jerry Ollinger. So he's on camera in his clerics, so a figure of authority, talking to first-year students and giving definitions that totally violate Catholic teaching. For instance, about they go into straight. What is straight? What is gay? What is transgender? What is bisexual? It's like, a transgender is someone whose identity doesn't reflect their biological sex. There's like zero Catholic teaching in this, and it is completely scandalous. But once again, it's one of those things that Father Jenkins has not only allowed, but he's approved.
I have to say, too, the disorientation of a young student, they don't go by just merely what's being taught in a classroom. It's the whole ambiance, all the gay crowds that are being catered to, what's on the website, what's happening in these introduction classes. You get a sense of formation with all that. And you're supposed to get a sense of formation with all that. There used to be a sense of formation which was very Catholic, which was very assuring, which you have the truth, and this is a part of what you're getting when you come to Notre Dame. And when you put all of those, there was a priest one time that kind of talked about bricks and mortar. So there are bricks, which are, say, the big T's of the church, and then there's the little T's, the customs and little traditions and things that's the mortar that cements them together. Well, the same thing on a Catholic campus here. You have all this around, and you start chipping away and chipping away and chipping away at all the mortar, and pretty soon the bricks get kind of loose. And especially when you're having teachers on campus that if they're not Catholic, you can go to a comparative religious study. Well, the Catholic Church teaches this, but if you don't want to believe that, or they claim that, I mean, you were experiencing that at your own Catholic institute. It didn't go so well, even on this very day of the North American martyrs.
This is the very day that I got in trouble with my ostensibly Catholic school that I used to teach at. And yeah, I mean, that really strikes home when Christine talks about having non-Catholic teachers at the Catholic school. My school, which was an all-boys high school here in the Metro Detroit area, would consider, we're even considering having non-Catholics teach theology class. I mean, think about that. It's not just like teaching math or science or something like that. They were considering, and I had to interview these people because I was the department head. They had me interview Protestants to teach Catholic theology. They had me interview atheists to teach Catholic theology. And so when I hear about these things going on at the post-secondary level, at the college and university level, I'm like, well, it makes sense. And that's where it kind of all trickles down from, because high school look at at that and they say, oh, well, Notre Dame does it, or
look at how they have it.
Yeah, we're just going to model ourselves after that, and that's how they do. They model themselves after, and not even Catholic schools, but just the public secular education program in general.
You know, that's a huge point right there, where Notre Dame is being held up as an icon of how to do it, of what they do is the pattern, and it should be. And yet here you're getting a dissonant signal there, where smaller schools, institutions, or everything are looking at Notre Dame and saying, hey, this is, if it's working there, it must be okay, and church must approve it. The bishop would have said something about it. How come, if it was wrong, they would have corrected it, and all this type of thing. Or a lot of people just aren't aware of it. They just don't dig deep enough or look into it close enough. And there's so much money behind Notre Dame, and that do they really need more people out there? If someone pulls their donation, there's so much patrimony built up over the
billions
decades.
of dollars in endowment is what they have.
Absolutely, yeah. Actually, last I read, they have more money than the Vatican. So, but we only have a few minutes left, and we're supposed to be offering solutions in the last few minutes of the show. So, people have different ideas about solutions. Some people think Notre Dame is just too far gone. There are people out there who say, you just shouldn't send your students there at all. They need to stop getting money. Parents should be protesting and just not sending their children there. That's kind of the decision I've made, because Notre Dame has been courting my son really, really, really hard. Like multiple letters, multiple flyers, even offering full scholarships. And it's a big temptation for me, because I went to Notre Dame. I love the school. It has a special place for me, because that's where I came back to the faith. And there are, like I said, there are pockets of faith there. You just have to look for it, and you have to be careful. You just have to be very, very careful and vigilant. And if I lived in South Bend, and if I knew my son was like coming home and staying with me, so I can just keep an eye on things, then I would probably say, okay, you can go, because here I am, making sure you're not being led astray. But I can't do that, and I'm simply not going to send him away for 4 years, see him just a couple times a year, and then see him lose his faith and lose his soul for eternity. I'm just not risking that. So I've chosen not to do that. Now, if parents do want to send their students there, like I said, you have to be extra vigilant, and you have to make sure that they are getting involved in groups like Children of Mary and various other good, solid groups. But like I said, there are little pockets of faith, but you have to find them. And
every family is going to have to make that discernment call for themselves. It is nice, too, when you have a student, the rare high school kid, the high school senior, who is pretty well formed in his faith, because honestly, most high school seniors are not that way. But I had the pleasure of teaching several young men, and I, not trying to toot my own horn, but I was able to be involved in their faith formation in a very, very positive way. I still am in contact with these young men, and some of them are at Notre Dame currently right now, and they phone me all the time, hey, this is what's going on with the school. And you're right, there are those pockets of hope there. And if you have a well-formed young person, could be a young man, could be a young woman, who is attending Notre Dame, there are those pockets of hope, traditional Orthodox Catholics there. You just have to find them and stick with them.
Yeah, I guess a solution I'd like to see is more Catholic higher secondary education coming into formation. Thomas Aquinas College comes to mind, but of course they don't have something like the law school and this type of thing. You don't have billions of dollars behind them to have the research and the team and stuff. But at the same time, having universities start to come together. If there's people out there that understand the university system that can possibly pull it off, like back in the day when Christendom College got going. Steubenville has issues, but there's also, there's a Catholic aspect there. Thomas Aquinas College. So you really need to look for a Catholic. We need to start Catholic education almost over again. You almost have to. It's almost like, are you going to go ahead and revamp these old sisters orders or old, certain religious congregations? It almost is impossible to go in there and just revamp all that again. You're almost going to have to start a new one. And have it grow and have it get the backing. So
it's got to start at home too. Shameless plug for our recent Mic'd Up on homeschooling. Yes. David Gordon and I discuss the pitfalls and the things to do when you're homeschooling your children. So
100%. Absolutely, and you can do it too. You can do it. I'm a full-time mom, and have homeschooled all 4 of my children. Each of you guys homeschool. It can be done. All right, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of The Download. Now, please join us as we finish in prayer, begging Our Lady's intercession for our nation and our church and for Notre Dame. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus, exules filii Eve. ad te suspiramus gementes et flentes, in hoc lacrimarum vale, ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos, ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende, O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you again for joining us for today's discussion. We premiere a new episode every business day at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.